quantitative data are so important for us that we're going to take a deeper dive into tables and graphs that we can make from quantitative data. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the table in depth. Now, it has several new definitions that we want to look at right here. But before we even get into those, we want to notice that this example down here, we're actually going to build this with a spreadsheet program, which is probably a project for you. And we're going to take notes on how we do it on the next page because we're going to have to be able to replicate this for several projects in the course. Right. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is find that spreadsheet program. So let's go grab it. On this sheet with all the data sets for the course, I'm going to click on section 2.3 notes, G Sheet, Google Sheet. So I click on that, and it gives me this table which matches the table in the notes. Now, this is not your spreadsheet. So when you click on this, you will not have as much luck as me. I have all sorts of things available to me because it's my spreadsheet. You will have to make a copy. So you're going to click File and make a copy because you want to make your own copy of this that you can edit. So click File, make a copy. Now, to be kind to your instructor, it helps if you put your last name on this file. It's not strictly required, but if you could at the end or at the beginning kind of say your last name, it helps when we open several files to know whose is whose. We can get to it other ways, but it's just easier that way. You do want to make sure that you're logged into your Google account as you do this. So I particularly like doing this in Chrome as my browser, and then being logged into my Google account as I do this, and it should work. Do not try to do this. I would recommend on Safari as a browser. Get into Google Chrome, download it as your browser, or Firefox. Firefox also works, and get logged into your account. Okay, now we want to find the midpoints. That's the first thing we want to be able to find. So let's go back and look at the definition of what a midpoint is. So a midpoint is the middle number for a class. And you find that by taking the mean of consecutive lower class limits. Now the mean is just average. It means you add them up and you divide by 2. So you add up a lower class limit plus the next lower class limit and divide by 2. All right, so we will write that first of all for ourselves when we go to write how to do this. So it's going to be equal to parentheses, lower class limit. You write this on the next page because you're going to want this as your reference, plus the next lower class limit, close your parentheses, divide by 2. Right? That's the average of lower class limits. Okay, so let me go show you how this works in practice. So I grab my spreadsheet. I cannot do it for the first one because the first one is open-ended. So I'm going to have to do it for the second one. I mean, if you can do it for the first one, great, but we couldn't. So in here, I'm going to take the lower class limit, which is 20, plus the next lower class limit, which is 30. So I type equals, parentheses, 20 plus 30, close my parentheses, divide by 2. That's going to take the average of the lower class limit for this class plus the next lower class limit. I hit enter. This is my foundational midpoint. This is the basis for the rest of my midpoints. All right, so I know that one's 25. Now, I found that. That's great. How do I find the rest of the midpoints, right? So if you look back here, it says finding the rest of the midpoints. You add or subtract your class width. Right? And again, this method only will work for consistent class width, but we will have consistent class widths, so that won't be a problem. So to find the rest of my midpoints, let's go find it in the spreadsheet, and then we can see. Now, the first thing I'm going to need is my class width. I need to know what class width is, which we learned what that was in the previous section. It's from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50. It's how much it's gaining by each time. So in other words, it's equal to 30 take away 20, right? 30 take away 20 is 10. So I can see that the class width is 10. So I can use that fact and say, all right, to find my class midpoints, I type equals this cell, right? Cell B, column B, row 3. It's like Battleship if you've ever played that game when you were a child. So equals B3, so the 25 cell, plus 10, because 10 is my width. And then I hit enter, and we'll fill in that value as 35. I can click on it, And when I click on it, I can see the formula up here in the formula bar. It's up there. So that's great. But now I want to be able to drag that cell and drag that formula and have it fill out the rest of them for me. So if you click on the cell with the 35, it has blue all around it. It's highlighted. And I can see the formula up above. So if I move my cursor to the bottom right corner, it turns from an arrow to a hand, if you're on the edge, to a plus sign. And that's what you want, that plus sign. And you want to click and drag it down. Now, if you're in a place where you don't have a mouse, I would say a mouse is very helpful in this case. You can also copy, right? Edit, copy, Control C, and then paste, Control V, right? Paste, paste, right? That would also work if you don't have a good mouse or if you're on a tablet or something like that. All right, so that's how we find the rest of the midpoints, right? So we take equals the foundation midpoint plus the width, and we then drag it down. That's what it means when you move your cursor to the plus sign and you drag it down the column. And I will say also to find the width is the next lower class limit, right? If you take lower plus next lower, it's the next lower class limit minus the lower class limit, right? If you think of those from the foundational midpoint, right? Oops, limit, sorry, right? This will work no matter what table you're on. Now, there is one other thing to note in here, which is to find the first midpoint, to find the first midpoint, to find midpoint above. It would be equal to the foundational midpoint minus the width, not plus. So that's just something to note. All right, so if we look at our particular example, we actually have this. So I found all the rest of them by adding, right? I added 10, add 10, add 10, and it automatically fills in the cells. Up here at the top, I'm missing a midpoint. So I have to type equals the cell with 25 in it, so B3, minus 10, because it'll be 10 below as opposed to the other ones which are 10 above, because the class width is 10. And you'll notice it should make logical sense. 25 as a number is halfway between 20 and 29.99999. 35 is halfway between 30, and this is really 39.9999999. That's why we use 40, right, when we calculate this, and so on. So these numbers should be between those class limits. If they're not between the class limits, you did something wrong. So double check. The most common thing is to actually forget the parentheses on this first foundational midpoint. Okay, the next thing we need to find is the total. So if we look at our lovely table right here, we need this total. So the way to find the total is to type the equals button, and it actually knows what you want. What you want is the sum. So it's a sum formula. So sum, S-U-M, and then it should automatically fill it in. It's C2 to C6. It knows that you want to start at C2, which is the 403 number, and it adds all the way up to C6. It's adding those for you. On a side note, you can actually also see it in the bottom right corner, but that does not count as a formula. But in the bottom right corner, it tells us that the sum is 1622, which it is. All right, so let's go write that down. To find the total, you type equals, and it's the sum. And for our purposes, it'll always go to C2 colon and then C some other number, depending on how many there are in your particular set. So in our case, it stopped at C6 because we ended on row 6. But if it goes to row 12, it'll stop on C12. It'll stop wherever it needs to. That's why up here it says C2 to C6. So that's what I mean by C2 to C number, whatever that is. All right, now we want to find the relative frequencies. Actually, let me go back in here real quick. On this previous page, we can write in all of our midpoints. This was 15, this is 25, 35, 45, 55. We now know this total is 1622. Now we're going to find the relative frequencies. Okay, well, we actually already learned how to find relative frequencies. Relative frequency is the frequency divided by the total. I mean, that's what relative frequency is. So it's equal to the frequency divided by the total. Now the frequency will be sitting there in one of your cells. So let's look at it. So if I'm in cell D2, if I click on this D2, so it's got a blue ring around it, I want to type equals, and do not hit tab on this. Even though it's actually correct, it's not what we want for a reason. We don't want that C7 in the bottom to be written like that. So, but I do want the C2. So I'm going to type equals C2, divide. Don't listen to Google. Don't take their answer. You want C7. Now the way to do this is 1622. Just type the number, right? If you type the number, that's great. If you want to do cell referencing, you can't do a bare C7 like that because technically with dragability that is alterable. If you want to do that, you would type $C, that locks in C, and then $7. That locks in, it's called a fixed reference. It's locking cell C7 into place. So $C, $7. If that's too confusing for you and you don't like the dollar signs, don't like it at all, then never use plain C7. Don't do that. Just type in the number 1622 on your own. Whichever way you like it, that's fine. Just do one of those two. But do not take the automatic Google one. All right, so I'm going to do $C just for fun. $C, $7. So it fixes the reference, and I hit enter. Now Google is so smart, it thinks it knows what I want, and it is what I want. I could click the check mark and it'll automatically have all these filled out. If I accidentally hit the X button, which I've done sometimes, I'm like, oh no, I meant that and I didn't get it. What you can do is click on the cell that you already have built and drag it down, and then it'll work, and then they're all filled out. Okay, now there's another trick to this. We only want 3 decimal places. So if you can see, they're all highlighted, right? I move my cursor to the middle and it's an arrow, not a plus sign. I'm not dragging. Dragging is when you make it into a plus sign and drag it down. I'm not doing that. I'm actually just putting my cursor in the middle so it's an arrow and dragging down this way. Another way to do it is to click on the cell, hit your shift key and hold it down, and then use your arrow keys and arrow down the column. Either way, you've highlighted that column. You've made them all blue. And now you want to lower the decimal places, which is this button right up here. It's got an arrow to the left and a decimal. And you want to click it and then keep clicking it until you get down to 3 decimal places. Isn't that nice? All right, so let's make notes about what we just did. So to get the relative frequency, we took the frequency divided by the total. So if we want to make a note to ourselves, we could say in cell D2, because it will always be 2, you type equals C2 divided by the total. Now you can do the total one of 2 ways. You can either do the number, or you can do $C, $number, whatever that number is. In our case, it was 7, but that will change depending on your problem. To do rounding, oh, and then we dragged it down. Drag down, right? For rounding, we highlighted the column, right? We turned it all blue, right? We highlight the column. And then we click on the symbol that looks like this a lot to make it so that there's less decimal places. All right, now I'm going to go put all of those numbers into my sheet. So all the numbers I found, the 0.248, the 0.348. Now we found those before, if you'll notice. But we did it by hand with Desmos. It's actually a lot faster and easier if you do it with a Google Spreadsheet program. Once you get used to what you're doing. We're taking our time here because we're writing notes about how to do every little thing. But once we know how to do this, it's actually very fast.